I'm McKenna Peterson.
I'm Malia Kellerman.
I'm Elise Greger.
And I'm Chloe Henry.
And our presentation is on how is India impacted by malnutrition. So what is malnutrition? Malnutrition is an umbrella term that includes the sectors of undernutrition, overnutrition, and nutrient deficiency that significantly impose on Indian society. Undernutrition is a commonly stereotyped example of malnutrition and is the result of the lack of food and substance to sustain healthy living. However, overnutrition is also becoming a major problem and is from the absence of protein-rich foods and nutrients provided in one's diet that leads to an unhealthy lifestyle. Malnutrition has several negative impacts on India's environment, economy, culture, and the current and future society. Connections with the economy. India has been impacted economically by malnutrition, specifically through a decrease in the productivity of the workforce and an underperforming agricultural sector. Improper diet leads to a variety of health risks, but also a significant deficit in work productivity and capacity. As a result, the nutrient deficit causes a ripple effect among individuals that significantly impacts local economies. An underperforming agricultural sector has not been able to keep up with the rapid population growth and has serious issues with productivity. These pictures display some examples of the workforce and show the tough working conditions of India. If you are weaker and less able to contribute from malnutrition, you cannot properly work in these conditions and provide for your family.
Poverty. So the cycle of poverty begins at an early age with children in families in poverty. Throughout these children's lives, they are undernourished, and then at the age they go into the workforce, they aren't at their full production potential. This puts them and their families in poverty, which is where the cycle begins once again with the next generation. Since so many people are in this cycle, there's a spiral of disinvestment and decline in the Indian workforce and the country's overall productivity. This is a photo of a low-income community in India. Culture and overpopulation. Indian culture and the immense Indian population go hand in hand. Indian people are very biased towards boys over girls, which is why there is a much larger male population. Many women and their children are very mistreated and undernourished, and many of them are also forced to have many children, which contributes more to the population. Families in poverty have an especially high rate of domestic violence due to stress on men who aren't able to contribute as much to the workforce. These families also have many children and a greater need for food that they can't obtain. This is also why there's a food shortage in India, specifically, but also in many other parts of the world. This photo depicts India's immense population.
Environmental causes and effects. Two huge health contributors to malnutrition are the lack of clean water and widespread sanitation issues. A primary cause of contaminated drinking water is the lack of indoor plumbing across much of India. Open sewers can easily contaminate water sources, primarily rivers. Poor infrastructure means that many people are contaminating their water supply with their own personal waste. Heidi Worley from Population Reference Bureau, Washington, D.C., states, quote, 1/2 of India's population, at least 62 million people, defecates outside, end quote. This leads to major health and sanitation issues. According to the World Health Organization, quote, 50% of malnutrition is associated with repeated diarrhea or intestinal worm infections from unsafe water or poor sanitation and hygiene, end quote. This doesn't allow the body to absorb nutrients from food, culminating in undernutrition or wasting.
Overnutrition versus undernutrition. Both overnutrition and undernutrition are both very prominent in the Indian population. They began to cause the country to have very significant public health issues and have caused the country's overall production levels to decrease. Over 20% of the population is overweight and 40% of the population is underweight. Both overnourishment and undernourishment can cause diseases or make one more susceptible to them. Overweight individuals are more likely to get heart disease and possibly cancer, whereas underweight individuals are more likely to get illnesses like malaria. This graph shows the percentage of underweight people in India, China, and the US, and shows the difference between them.
Scientific background and impacts. Overnutrition is primarily caused by the lack of access to protein-rich foods and or extended periods of overly restricted calorie intake. Children are often most affected by undernutrition, which can weaken their immune systems, lead to stunted growth, and also lead to poor brain development. A weakened immune system leaves a person vulnerable and much more susceptible to illnesses. This can lead to death in the worst situations. In addition to immune system problems, underfed children tend to experience stunted growth. According to Worley, quote, approximately 1 in 4 children under the age of 5 suffer from stunting, a form of malnutrition in which children are shorter than normal for their age. In India, almost 62 million children, 48%, are stunted, end quote. Lacking the proper nutrients to grow and be strong results in the opposite: weak bones, unbalanced growth, stunted development, and it also puts the child at risk of long-term complications. On the other end of the spectrum, the wealthier areas of India have major problems with obesity, which is caused by overnutrition, another recognized form of malnutrition. When an individual consumes too many calories or the wrong types of calories, their food processing system slows, changing their metabolism. This can lead to obesity or becoming significantly overweight. Overnutrition can also lead to diabetes, increased susceptibility to infectious diseases, cardiac arrest, heart problems, stomach problems, allergic reactions, and more. Nutrition is resource.
An underperforming agricultural sector. 3/4 of India's population is involved in these type of rural locations and relies on its income. However, 70% of these people are living in poverty. Food security is a major problem for many Indian families, and when the agricultural industry is underperforming, it heightens these concerns and makes it even more difficult for them to provide. Although India is home to many flourishing crops of the region, the booming population growth has exceeded the industry's current ability to provide.
If malnutrition continues, there will be more deaths, more starving people, and much more money invested into the current problem. The outcome of not fixing this would be devastating and hurt the country immensely. Even though this is a largely complex issue, the solutions are fairly simple. Improved sanitation and clean water, increased efficiency in agriculture, and educating mothers on hygiene are fairly simple solutions. Referring back to what Malia stated from World Health Organization, quote, 50% of malnutrition are associated with repeated diarrhea, intestinal worm infections, and unsafe and poor sanitation and hygiene, end quote. If these people are educated on the importance of sanitation and good hygiene, then nearly half the problem would be solved. Increased efficiency in agriculture is a contributing factor as well. There's poor irrigation and lack of education. In order for the agriculture to grow, irrigation and technology needs to improve. We recognize the limitations, such as being unable to gather educators and economic restrictions, but overall, the most important and simple solution is to educate. The majority of farmers in India have learned generational techniques. Most haven't even had the ability to leave their own town. WeFarm is a free non-internet cell phone app that is used all around the world. Less educated farmers use this app to gain techniques, information, and problem solve with global peers. Education about the importance of sanitation, education about proper nutrition is critical. Education about agriculture and new connections through technology is now readily available and is a game changer. Education about health and money is a key aspect to how you solve India's ongoing problems. As Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Every 5 seconds, a child dies because he or she was hungry. It looks like this presentation has taken about 10 minutes. So about 120 children have died in the duration of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Start with Elise. Would you describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of group discussion?
Well, originally we were looking at some different solutions. So we had considered GMOs as one of our possible solutions, but through talking with our team and looking through the different lenses, we decided not to include it because of differing perspectives on it, as well as we couldn't support it with the type of evidence and support that we needed to put it into our argument.
Thank you. Leah, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem your group identified?
I think McKenna's lens, which was the futuristic lens, definitely had a much greater impact because in my research, I was not focused on the solutions. I was just focused on the scientific lenses and the like how the body works and what's happening with undernutrition and overnutrition in the body. But with the futuristic lens, when it showed the solutions and how we need to educate, I never thought about that. I thought it was just kind of a money thing, like they just need more money, which is true. But education is really one of the biggest tools, and so looking at the solutions from what McKenna found, I think that really broadened my perspective on the issue.
Thank you. And McKenna, describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that made you think differently about your team's solution or conclusion.
Well, I have the futuristic lens, and so I thought Elise's argument was, I learned a lot from it. I realized that money was a problem, but I didn't understand how involved and how much the money was involved with the problem, and we need money for the education, but we understand that there's many downfalls to not having enough money, but I think that the economic lens, which was Elise's, was the most significant that changed my idea of the solution.
Thank you. And last, Chloe, having finished your project, what, if anything, do you consider to be a gap in your team's research that, if addressed, would make you feel even more confident about your conclusion?
Well, I think we just needed to address like GMOs. That's we use that as a short-term solution, and I think if we had more research on different solutions, I think we could have brought that into the presentation, as well as the political lens, because we didn't really address that as much, political historical lens. So I think that was kind of missing depending on what India's government specifically was doing to approach the problem.